2 out in the 9th for an American League All-Star victory. One of the most famous home runs was crushed by Reggie Jackson in the 1971 game, a la Roy Hobbs off a light tower at Tiger Stadium. By their very nature, All-Star games bring out the best baseball has to offer, whether it's a game-winning homer or a game-winning collision. Out on the field, these midsummer classics are played out to the limit, and Bo knows that, too.
I don't know if there's ever been anyone do it.
He's remarkable, and look at that one. Bo Jackson says hello.
That Bo Jackson greeting card had an Anaheim postmark on it, courtesy of the 1989 All-Star game out in California. Tonight, we bid you a live hello from Wrigley Field in Chicago, where tomorrow night the 61st All-Star game will unfold. Good evening, everybody. I'm Dan Roan, and welcome to Wrigley Field and to our hour-long All-Star special here on Channel 9. For the next 60 minutes, we'll be covering about as much ground as the All-Star outfielders will when they take the field tomorrow night. We'll profile the starters for both the American and the National League squads, and we'll get in close to home with up-to-the-minute looks at Chicago's very own All-Stars this season, and we'll also take a look back at past All-Star games both at Wrigley Field and at Comiskey Park. We'll also have Harry Carey and Steve Stone along with us. Tom Paciorek and Jimmy Durham will join us too. So make it a late dinner tonight. Pull up a chair and join us on Channel 9 for Chicago's very own All-Stars.
WGN Sports presents live from Wrigley Field, Chicago's very own All-Stars. A historic look at All-Star play in the friendly confines and profiles of Chicago's All-Stars in this year's Classic. Chicago's very own All-Stars is brought to you in part by Diet Pepsi. Taste that's generations ahead. Geo. Get to know Geo. Sold and serviced by Chevrolet Geo dealers. American Express Traveler's Checks. Don't leave home without them. McDonald's. Food, folks, and fun. You know the one. McDonald's for food, folks, and fun. And True Value. For quality, selection, and personal attention, make True Value your store of first choice.
The bigger than ever, better than ever.
Time in 7 years that the city of Chicago has opened its arms to the All-Stars. Comiskey Park played host back in '83, and it was nearly 30 years ago, back in 1962, that the game was last played here at Wrigley Field. But Chicago has always been well represented on the teams representing the National and the American Leagues. Appling, Aparicio, and Fox from the White Sox, Cavaretta, Banks, and Sandberg from the Cubs, just to name a few. It never mattered either that the teams were lousy, which they usually were. In fact, a couple of years ago, the Cubs put 6 players on an All-Star team and went on to finish in last place in the Eastern Division. But Chicago's greatest contribution to the All-Star game is Arch Ward, the former sports editor of the Chicago Tribune. It was Ward who dreamed up this All-Star idea in the first place back in 1933. He arranged to have it played first down on the South Side. The original All-Star game drew a capacity crowd to Comiskey Park and drew all the big baseball names of that era as well. Babe Ruth was the main attraction, and the managers were living legends. Connie Mack for the American League, John McGraw for the National.
We have a sellout, a big crowd, a fine day, and I hope the best team wins. Thank you.
And that's what McGraw got. As if he were following a script, Babe Ruth clobbered the first All-Star home run, providing the winning margin in a 4-2 victory for the American League. The results were no different when the All-Star game next returned to Chicago and Wrigley Field in 1947. Reserve Stan Spence drove in the winning run as the Americans won again. Final score 2-1. In fact, by the time the 1950 game was played in Comiskey Park, the American Leaguers had rolled up a 12-4 advantage in the series. But 1950 is considered a turnaround game by baseball historians. In the first extra inning affair in All-Star annals, Red Schoendienst homered in the 14th, and the National League had a 4-3 victory. In the 33 years that passed between All-Star appearances at Comiskey Park, that National League turnaround had become utterly complete. When they came to Comiskey for the 50th anniversary game in '83, the senior circuit had won 11 All-Star games in a row and 19 of the previous 20. AL manager Harvey Keene told his guys to just go out and have some fun. And they did. A lot of fun. mostly at the expense of National League pitcher Atlee Homaker of the Giants. Freddie Lynn rocked him for the first grand slam in All-Star history. The American League took its revenge in a 7-run third inning and a 13-3 victory. That game in '83 down at Comiskey Park actually got the American League back on track. They now have won 2 in a row and 3 of the last 4 All-Star games. Tomorrow night, if they can win, they will have won 3 straight against the National League for the first time since 1946 through 49. So the American League finally starting to make some noise in this long series of 60 games. It'll be 61 tomorrow night. As we said, the last time they played the ball game here was 1962. The American Leaguers won the game by a score of 9-4. There were 4 home runs hit in that game, including a game-deciding 3-run shot by Rocky Colavito. After that game in '62, the National League went off on a tear in which they won 11 consecutive games and 19 of 20 All-Star games, and an unbelievable amount of success for the National League. But as far as the games in Chicago have been concerned, the American League has a mark of 5-1. And in 1990, they figure they can beat up on the Nationals again with all the home run power that Tony La Russa will have. In his 4th full season as A's manager, Tony La Russa makes his 2nd appearance as the All-Star skipper. He'll be trying to go to 2-0, and he'll run 3 of his own players out there to start the game. One of them is the first baseman, Mark McGwire, starter over there for the 3rd consecutive year, and an All-Star performer in each of his 4 Major League seasons. McGuire's the first to say he doesn't deserve the honor this year, thinking instead about Cecil Fielder of the Tigers. But Mark's power numbers are solid, 20-plus homers, 50-plus RBI, and Mark McGwire starts at first base for the AL. Over at second, Steve Sachs of the Yankees becomes one of a select number of baseball players to start an All-Star game in each league, having started for the National League as a Dodger back in '83. Sachs has been one of the few bright spots for the Yankees in a dismal season. A sharp fielding second sacker and a .275 hitter. Steve Sachs, an All-Star starter at second. Cal Ripken Jr. of Baltimore is the AL starter at short for the 7th straight year, though Ozzie Guillen of the Sox has the better numbers. The one stat that really stands out with Ripken is his consecutive game streak, 1332 and rising. Cal's average is on the rise too, his fielding is fine, and he's where he usually is at All-Star time in the starting lineup. At third base, another All-Star vet, Wade Boggs of the Red Sox, the most prolific hitter in terms of average of his era. Boggs mainly a contact hitter, though he can go deep too. Wade will start at third base for the 5th consecutive year. His average is down some this season, but the 6-time AL batting champion is ready to roll once again at third base. In the outfield, Rickey Henderson is an All-Star for the 8th consecutive season, and has he earned it this year? Rickey's already blown past legendary Ty Cobb for the all-time leadership in the American League stolen base department during 1990. But his batting numbers are the ones that really jump out at you. Leading the league in hitting with 17 home runs heading into last night's game. Henderson is having his best year ever, and he'll be in the starting outfield tomorrow night. The center fielder is a guy making the first of what could be a long line of All-Star trips. 20-year-old Ken Griffey Jr. has been compared to Willie Mays for his play this season. Hard to argue if you've seen him play. Defense like that and hitting over .330 with power. Griffey should be called upon by AL managers for years to come. In right field, the prototype. From Oakland, number 33, Jose Canseco. Jose missed the '89 game with injuries, but he's played his way back onto the squad this season, the leading vote getter on either team. Baseball fans obviously excited to see how far the big man can hit one at Wrigley Field. Nobody can hit him further, that's for sure. Canseco an All-Star for the 4th time, a starter for the 2nd time, and a huge weapon in Tony La Russa's American League arsenal. Finally, the All-Star catcher, Sandy Alomar Jr., making a splash in his first American League season. Solid behind the plate, hitting close to .300. Sandy's brother Roberto is a National League reserve, so some serious bragging rights are on the line here. The rest of the AL position players as follows. Lance Parrish beating out Carlton Fisk for the catching spot. Ozzie Guillen of the White Sox does make the team, however. Ellis Burks will not play because of injury. And the pitchers, some real fireballers here. led by Roger Clemens of Boston and Bob Welch of the Oakland A's. In fact, earlier this morning, Tony La Russa named Bob Welch to start the game tomorrow. Welch with a record of 13-3 and an earned run average of 2.91. Welch played in the All-Star game as a rookie in 1980, and 10 years later, he'll be a starting pitcher. You know, we talked about the American League home run power, so guess what happened today in the home run hitting contest? The National League 4, the American League 1, all those big American League mashers, and only one home run. Canseco didn't hit any of them. Mark McGwire had the only AL homer in the contest today. For the National League, guess who? Ryne Sandberg broke a 1-all tie in the last inning with 3 home runs in his trip. Maybe that's home field advantage coming into play, and maybe the National League can turn that momentum around to its advantage tomorrow night. We'll check out their starting lineup when we come back to Wrigley Field right after these messages. Wrigley Field, which has been taken over by the National League All Stars for a couple of days. The nameplates up above those cubicles. Ozzie Smith, Sean Dunstan's there, Dennis Martinez, and Tim Wallach, and some of the other ones back to my right. And what a group. It's been kind of weird, actually, to walk in here during the day and see guys like Darryl Strawberry or Ozzie or some of the other National League stars over on this side of the ballpark for a change. But they're ready to go in the ball game, and actually they should be ready to go, too. There's a little pride at stake for the National League in 1990. They've lost, as we said, 3 out of the last 4 and 2 in a row, and they don't want to make it 3. Roger Craig runs the National League All-Stars. First time for Roger, but he'll certainly recognize his first baseman, last year's leading vote getter, Will Clark. The Thrill is still looking for his first All-Star hit, but he gets plenty of them during the regular season. .333 last year in the mid-280s for 1990. An impact player in every respect, and his determination would be enough to keep the National League bench all charged up. Will Clark of the Giants starting at first base. Then at second, you know this guy, don't you? I thought you did. The Cubs' Ryne Sandberg. While his team is struggling at midseason, Rhino is sparkling, battling for the league batting title. He leads the league in home runs with 24, and you know by now about all of his fielding records. Sandberg's season to now has surpassed his MVP year of 1984. A lot of people think he may win that trophy again. Ryne Sandberg at second base for the 5th consecutive season. The shortstop is a guy named Smith, Osborne Earl Smith to be precise, known simply to baseball fans as Ozzie. The Wizards' talents are waning. Barry Larkin and Sean Dunston may be about to overtake him, but Ozzie will be the starting NL shortstop once again for the 8th consecutive season. Ozzie Smith, the starter at short for the National League. With Mike Schmidt's retirement, the starting third base position was left wide open, and it's been filled this year by Chris Sabo of the Cincinnati Reds. The Rookie of the Year in '88, Sabo has hovered around the 300 mark this season. His fielding and his consistency, though, are vastly improved over the last 2 seasons, and Chris Sabo has become a starter at third base for the National League this season. In the outfield, we'll start with last year's most valuable player, Kevin Mitchell of the Giants, in left. 47 homers a year ago, and he's barely slacked off at all in 1990. Kevin's batting average is actually up over last year, just over 300 at last report, and Mitch went by the 20-homer mark this weekend against the Cubs. Kevin Mitchell opening for manager Roger Craig in left field. In center, Lenny Dykstra has been recognized by fans across the country for his red-hot bat and his all-out effort. He's found a new home in Philadelphia, leading the major leagues in hitting. You'd never have guessed it when the season began, but Lenny Dykstra is the starting all-star center fielder. And on Dykstra's left is somebody with a pretty good idea of how to handle right field at Wrigley. Andre Dawson out there for the 7th time in his career, including all 4 of his years with the Cubs. With those bad knees, Andre could barely run in the spring, but he's been running full tilt ever since. And the Hawk will fly once again in right field for the National League. Behind the plate, Benito Santiago of the Padres would have made a 2nd straight appearance as the National League starter. But Santiago will miss the game because of injury. He was having a great season when he went down, too, batting .317 with 9 home runs. In his absence, Mike Scioscia of L.A. and Atlanta's Greg Olson are the able-bodied catchers. Scioscia will start the game, and Olson will back up behind the plate. the rest of the reserves as follows: Alomar, Sean Dunston of the Cubs on there, and so is Barry Larkin. Also, Barry Bonds, Bonilla, Gwynn, and Darryl Strawberry. And the pitching staff, headed by Frank Viola of the Mets, who became the National League's first 13-game winner over the weekend. But the National League starter tomorrow night is Jack Armstrong of Cincinnati, 11-3 for the year in only his second year. In fact, he spent a good part of '89 in AAA ball at Nashville. Tomorrow night, Jack Armstrong will start for the National League. And now it's time for us to turn our attention to Chicago baseball and to get out of these guys' way and let them get the clubhouse cleaned up following the old-timers game. Now we want to talk not only about the Cubs and Sox who made the All-Stars, but about team performances as well. It's been kind of a disappointment over on this side of town, but it's been a delight on the south side. And we'll have those stories when we come back. Side of town. You know, 1991 was supposed to be the year of the White Sox revival. New stadium, new uniforms, and what they hope to be the entrance to a new and successful era. But in an almost shocking turnaround this season, the Sox have jumped the gun on the success part of that plan. They'd set the stage for their surprise season last year, 24 games under 500 at the All-Star break in '89, and then 37-36 the rest of the way. But while there was some reason for optimism in 1990, nobody could have anticipated the extent of the Sox success so far this season. At this moment, the White Sox find themselves in a wrestling match with mighty Oakland for the lead in the American League West. Manager Jeff Torborg has employed a fundamental approach with his team, chipping away with an early run or two, then relying on speed, defense, and an exceptional pitching staff to hold them. Eric King has been the anchor of the starting rotation, closing in on 10 victories with a couple of shutouts to his credit. And from the left side, Greg Hibbert's been reliable, if not the luckiest pitcher by record. His ERA, though, is in the low 200s. But the Sox bullpen has been amazing. Not only Bobby Thigpen, the all-star closer. We've come to expect it from Thiggy. But what about Barry Jones, the middleman who jumped into double figures in wins way before the all-star break? He's been remarkable. Torborg has great flexibility here, and he's getting the most out of it. Wayne Edwards, Don Paul, Scott Radinsky, and Kenny Patterson, all busy arms in the bullpen, and they've all come through. Those guys would be first to tell you that their jobs are a whole lot easier because of the defense that's being played behind them. Ozzie Guillen at shortstop, never better.
Explain that in a minute. Kirby up. Ozzie's got to hurry. Bare hands. Yes! What a play by Ozzie Guillen. The only way he's going to get him.
And in the outfield, Ivan Calderon typifies the Sox turnaround. Overweight and unhappy in '89, Ivan has done everything right this season. Veteran leadership from Ron Kittle and Carlton Fisk, rookie enthusiasm from Sammy Sosa and Robin Ventura, contributions from the entire 25-man roster. The Sox are winning as a team. They've already proven they can stand up to Oakland. They've also proven they can win even when they don't get any hits. The White Sox have been a smash in the first half of their final season in Old Comiskey Park. They've put themselves in position to make this a truly historic season. You know, when your team is 18 games over 500 at the All-Star break, you've got to figure you've had some All-Star performances in there to get you that far, and the Sox have had more than their share this season. You could have made cases for at least 6 White Sox guys to make the All-Star team. Carlton Fisk, Eric King, Ivan Calderon, and Barry Jones. Those 4 guys didn't make it. 2 were selected, though, shortstop Ozzie Guillen and short man Bobby Thigpen. Now, we've been happy at Channel 9 this summer to be able to bring you White Sox baseball again, and right now we're going to turn it over to our White Sox broadcast team, Jim Durham and Tom Paciorek.
Well, White Sox revival days are in full bloom here on the south side of Chicago as we hit the All-Star break for the 1990 season. In the first half of the season, White Sox have been outstanding. They have gotten great pitching, especially so in the bullpen. They have been in hot contention with the Oakland A's, the defending world champs, all during the first half of the season, and hopefully that will bode well as they embark on play in the second half of the season after tomorrow night's game at Wrigley Field. And in the game tomorrow night at Wrigley Field, the White Sox will be represented on the field. Bobby Thigpen, of course, one of the top relief pitchers in baseball, and a guy that those of us feel is the best shortstop in baseball, Ozzie Guillen. Well, he'll be there too. And Tom Paciorek, earlier this week, had a chance to visit with Ozzie.
Thank you, Jim Durham. And Ozzie Guillen made the American League All-Star team in 1988, but he wasn't able to play because of an injury. Now he's back in 1990, having a terrific year, both offensively and defensively for the White Sox. Now, Ozzie, does making the team this year make it any better for you because the team itself is playing so well?
I'll tell you what, Tom, I just talked to Hermie Schneider about that. The first All-Star team I make it because they had to pick somebody out. We be last place team, and we not play real well that year. And I come now I come with different idea. I come with Bobby Thigpen, one of the best reliever in baseball right now, and I call myself. Of course, they gotta treat me different. They are not the players, but I think it's going to be a cider this year, and I'll be in 1988.
Well, how about some of the other guys? Calderon, Jones, Hibbert, these guys, they have to be given some consideration too because they're all having great years.
I tell you what, that's a tough thing to pick the All-Star team. You can make everybody happy. It's a lucky thing, you got a good years, and some guys got a better year than you, or they can pick you because they got pick somebody out. But I think in my All-Star team, I pick Calderon, I pick Barry Young, I pick Eric King, Carlton Fix, and Greg Hibbert. They can make it because everybody can make it. But I tell you what, if the roster be 40 guys roster, they be there.
Okay, if the game is on the line, is there one pitcher in the National League that you would like to face? You ever any dreams about facing any one pitcher from the National League?
The thing is, good thing is we don't got Candelaria there. But I think I just face Viola. I know what he's going to throw me, and because another guys, I don't know where to go. But I think about that. I think Viola, I hope I don't face Franco.
Okay, well, Ozzie, thank you so much for visiting with us. Good luck in the All-Star game. Of course, good luck in the rest of the White Sox games. And earlier this week, I had a chance to talk to Bobby Thigpen about making his first All-Star team.
Well, I think it's absolutely an honor. It's something I think every player, once they start playing in the big leagues, I think they look forward to being selected at least once. I think this will be the highlight so far of my career, being selected to an All-Star game, and a team. It's just something I think that, it's just, like you said, you're rubbing shoulders with guys that maybe have been there 4, 5, 6 years in a row, and maybe some new guys, but for one day, you're one of the best in the league, and like I said, it's an honor.
Is there one hitter in the National League that you would like to face, game on the line, just like in a regular season, but it is the All-Star game, one guy in the National League team?
Well, since we played together, I guess I'd like to see Will up there and see how I do against him one time. It's not going to count. All the stats won't count, so I might just go right at him and just see what he can do with it. But Wrigley Field, depending on which way the wind's going to be blowing in, it'll be fun. Hopefully, I can keep from smiling and laughing at him. We might get up there and just not be able to concentrate too much, but it's going to be fun. If I do get to face him, it'll be a lot of fun because we did play together for a couple of years, and I'm sure he might want to do the same thing.
Okay, the big game is Tuesday night at Wrigley Field. The White Sox will be well represented with Ozzie Guillen and Bobby Thigpen. Of course, Jeff Torborg will be the bullpen coach for Tony La Russa's American League All-Star team. It should be a great game, and let's go back to Big Jim Durham upstairs.
Well, an exciting All-Star game is anticipated for tomorrow night, that's for sure, at Wrigley Field. And an exciting second half of the season is anticipated here in Comiskey Park in this, the final season in Old Comiskey Park. Boy, wouldn't it be fitting if the White Sox were to maintain this tremendous run they have had so far and win the American League West, and who knows, go on and win the American League pennant for the first time since 1959. That would be a fitting end to a grand old ballpark.
the middle of an Eastern Division race that they would go on to win. It was a season to remember, and a season that gave rise to great anticipation for 1990. Well, we're halfway through 1990, and we're already anticipating 1991. It's been a nightmare of a season at Wrigley Field for a variety of reasons, and the Cubs find themselves now on the verge of being knocked out of the race for good. Maybe we should have paid more attention to the prediction that Cub fan Bill Murray made on opening night at Wrigley Field.
The heavy stuff's not going to come down to play sometime.
Jeez, where have we heard that before?
Bill was right. There was some heavy stuff coming, and it soon fell on the Cubs like a truck. An avalanche of pitching troubles, from Rick Sutcliffe's shoulder surgery to Mitch Williams' knee operation to the ineffectiveness of several other key performers.
There it goes, way back, might be. It is a home run with the bases loaded. And Katie barred the door. Another 5-run inning for the Mets.
The result up to now, a very quick flight from the top of the National League East to the bottom. And the view from Don Zimmer's window seat hasn't been a pleasant one. Zim has, however, been able to savor, along with all Cub fans, first-class performances by his 3 All-Stars.
There's a drive, forget about it, home run, no doubt about it. Andre Dawson hits the first pitch. There's a high fly ball, deep left field, way back, might be out of here. It is! It is! There it goes, way back. It might be. It is! Holy cow! Dunston just hit one.
Ryne Sandberg, Andre Dawson, and Sean Dunston have all come through with career seasons up to now. And in the cases of Dawson and Sandberg in particular, those are very large achievements. As for the pitching, there have been subtle signs of improvement, particularly with starter Mike Bilecki. Mitch Williams is now ready to come back to the bullpen, and center fielder Jerome Walton will return shortly from his injury. If they can get Greg Maddux turned around, it may not be too late for the Cubs to make things interesting for themselves in the second half.
He led all second basemen in the National League with 20.
For the All-Star game, it is a beautiful evening out here at Wrigley Field. You know, people who spin the turnstiles coming in and out of this ballpark day in and day out come here for any number of reasons. Sunshine, fresh air, Ryne Sandberg, and Andre Dawson, not necessarily in that order. Rhino and Andre, the only Chicago starters in this year's All-Star game, a reflection of both their national presence and of their abilities. Sean Dunston also on the club as a reserve, and Don Zimmer will be one of Roger Craig's coaches. We'll now turn it over to the voices of the Cubs, Harry Carey and Steve Stone.
Boy, what a sight here at Wrigley Field. An all-star game. I know whether you're a manager, a player, or a coach, it must be a big, big thrill as you look out over this beautiful ballpark.
Well, there's no doubt about it, Harry, and I think being chosen to be a coach in the All-Star game by Roger Craig, it becomes more important and a bigger thrill for me because I am the Cub manager in our town, and it's going to be quite a day.
Will Roger reveal any of his signals to you now that you're his coach for one day?
Harry, first of all, I don't know where I'm going to coach yet. I don't know whether I'm coaching third or first or I'm sitting in on the bench with him. I'll just do whatever he tells me to do.
Yeah. Tell me some of the problems of picking teams for an all-star game. It isn't as simple as it looks in the paper. A manager's got to think of a lot. He's got to be sure to pick one player from every team, doesn't he?
Well, that's true, Harry. And, you know, I hate to hear other managers complain to where it's almost like a knock against a certain manager for not picking one of his players. Like today, I heard Joe Morgan in the paper this morning saying that he thought it was almost like a disgrace that Bodiger wasn't picked by Tony La Russa. Tony La Russa has asked a ton of people to try to make this final decision with a pitching staff. And even if I was a manager and I thought one of my players should have been picked on the All-Star team, I don't think I would ever tell the press how I felt. because it's like a knock against the other manager, and they're doing the best they can to try to pick the best people they can.
Let me ask you, do you think maybe they're not doing it right? Do you think the fans should select the players? I happen to think that way. Or do you think the players should select the players? There's always a lot of controversy about that.
I've been listening to that, Harry, for 42 years, and I don't know the right answer. But the one thing, it is for the fans. There's no question about it. And I guess as long as we let the fans pick it, I guess that's the way we'll go.
Zim, we got two of your all-stars. One man who led all the National Leaguers in votes by the fans, and that's Ryne Sandberg. And the other man, the great right fielder of the Cubs, Andre Dawson. And Steve's going to talk to him now, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Harry.
You're right, Harry. These are two of the greatest ball players in the game today. And Andre, we'll start with you. It's got to be particularly satisfying for you after the end of last season to come back and put together the kind of year that makes you a National League All-Star.
Well, I'm just pleased with the progress that I've made, not only throughout spring training, but the first half of the season as far as my physical well-being is concerned. And never really doubted my ability. I just felt if I was healthy and able to go out and play every day, numbers usually take care of themselves. But the All-Star game itself is going to be a thrill in a sense that it's here in Chicago.
And the All-Star game will be played right here in Rhino. You had the MVP season in 1984, and this year is even better. What's it going to mean to you to take the field at second base in front of the home folks?
Well, I think it'll be very special. You know, I think that it'll be different from the past All-Star games that I've been in, just for the fact that it's here at Wrigley Field. I think this will be a great place to have something special like the All-Star game. I think it'll be, you know, a big thrill for me, and I think it'll be a lot of fun for the fans.
A lot of people decide that they want a couple of days off during the All-Star break, but Andre, you're chosen as an All-Star. Does it give you a special sense of pride to play in that ball game?
Of course it does. You play in so many, and then you get the sense of what it's like. You get to play with the elite in the game itself, and further on down your career, you just assume have those 3 days off. But once you get around all of the hoopla surrounding the All-Star game, and you get on with the game itself, you look forward to it because actually you have more fun, I think, than you do at any other time during the season because the guys that do make the team, most of them are on the bench cracking jokes, you know, messing with the opposition. So you have a lot more fun, and that's the best part of it.
These guys are your enemies all year long, Rhino, and suddenly you find yourself in the same dugout trying to beat the American League. Is there some intensity during the All-Star game?
I think there is. You know, for that one game, we all make up the National League team, and once the games start, we actually feel like teammates for the one game, and it is a lot of fun. You get to be with some of the guys for the couple days, and it's just it's different, but you know, you get to be with these guys, and once the game starts, we actually pull together and try and come out with a win.
Both of you guys have hit home runs in the same game this year. Do you think there's a chance that both of you could hit a home run in the All-Star game?
Well, I've never hit a home run in the All-Star game. I find it tough just trying to get a base hit. So if that happens, I think, you know, it'll make the day for the fans, especially here in Chicago. But I just assume take a win. These guys have beat us the last 3 or 4 years or whatever, and we're starting to feel it a little bit. But one thing about the National League, we take this game seriously, and we try to do whatever it takes to win. So I just assume go out and do contribute any way that I can to a win.
You haven't seen these pitchers. They're all American League pitchers, of course. You getting any scouting reports on these guys?
Well, just the times that I've watched some of the top pitchers in the American League pitch on TV, that's about all that I see them. But you know, the All-Star games that I've been in have been totally dominated by good pitching, and I found it hard, you know, just to go up there and just try and get a base hit, let alone hit a home run. So you know, I think the pitching dominates the All-Star game. If the wind's blowing out here at Wrigley Field, it might be a different story.
Harry, it should be quite a game.
And so we're about ready now to look forward to the playing of the All-Star game. I know you're going to have a wonderful time. I'm looking forward to it myself. Let's all have some fun, and may the better team win.
All-Star Monday, and since the game itself is such a pricey ticket, $40 and $50 a pop, the Monday lineup is great for people who want to get in to see these guys. Tickets to the workout, the home run contest, and the old-timers went for $7.50 and $5, the best deal of the week anywhere. As for the players, a lot of them didn't even get into Chicago until the middle of the night, the Cubs included after their doubleheader in San Francisco. But it was obvious they enjoyed mingling with all their fellow stars. Today went off with barely a hitch on the inside, and outside the park there was just as much action going on.
324. There you go.
They may burn up a few cash registers during the All-Star festivities, but that would be a small price to pay for the booming business that this game will bring to merchants in the Wrigley Field area. Souvenir gear has been moving fast for a long time, and buyers will find everything they need. Also, restaurant and tavern owners are gearing up, having learned a lesson during last year's NL Championship Series in Chicago.
Last year's playoffs showed me that we were just completely packed throughout the entire game. And then after the game, it just got even crazier. So we even went and expanded our facility in anticipation of this year in the All-Star game.
The Cubs finished the pre-All-Star part of their schedule on the West Coast, which gave ballpark beauticians the time to give Wrigley Field a complete makeover. New paint, new sod, and a new trim for the outfield ivy. For Cubs management, All-Star preps have been ongoing really since 1987 when the game was first announced. They're ready for just about anything this week, though they wish they could print a few thousand more tickets.
There's another variable with Major League Baseball. They play a major role in this event, and there are partners in this, so it's not as if all decisions are made by the Chicago Cubs. I think it's more of a joint effort, and that would probably be the biggest difference. And the demand for this game, Dan, I think is greater than any event, including the first night game or playoffs. The ticket demand for this is greater than anything we've ever been subjected to.
Well, John's right, and what you'd like to do if you had a few thousand more tickets would be to go outside and sell them. Scalpers' price is well over $500 a seat for the 1990 All-Star game. We'll come back to Wrigley Field with the final word in just a moment. For tomorrow night's All-Star game for the American League, there on your left, Tony La Russa of the Oakland A's making his second consecutive appearance on the American League bench. And on the other side of the screen, San Francisco Giants manager Roger Craig, who is making his debut as an All-Star manager. Now, these two guys know each other very well, of course, managing on either side of the bay out in Oakland. And last year in the World Series, that's why they're here. They met in the Fall Classic, and they'll meet again tomorrow night. We talked to both managers about rivalries. Is there a Bay Area rivalry between them? Will one try to beat the other one? And they said really the biggest problem in managing in the All-Star game is trying to get everybody in the game, trying to make the proper selections of the reserves and the pitchers, and basically trying to keep everybody happy. They say, though, that winning the game is of the utmost importance, and they'll both be out after the victory tomorrow night. That'll about do it for us tonight from Wrigley Field. We appreciate you watching the show. We hope you've enjoyed it, and we hope you enjoy the rest of the All-Star festivities this week in Chicago. For now, live from Wrigley Field, Dan Roan.